I'm onto my webinar now.
Focus in mind.
Good. Good. Good.
Hello, Stephen, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you. Martin here. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Clodagh, can you hear me?
You're coming through loud and clear. This is Stephen here. Clodagh, are you still there?
Hi, Stephen, can you hear me? Perfect.
Yeah, all good this end.
Perfect. Just give it a few more minutes. Stephen, will you take the screen back to where you are? Okay. I will give it one more minute. Okay, I think we'll get started if everybody's okay. So thank you for joining us here online today. My name is Clodagh Barry and I work in regional development with the Western Development Commission. We were successful in our application for an NPAP funded project, which is a follow-on project to Circular Ocean, circularocean.eu. Some of you may already be familiar with the project. Our project is called the Blue Circular Economy. And we are looking at, we are partnering with Norway, Scotland, England, Denmark to look at the issue of fishing nets, ropes and components which is being left in our ocean. And we're building on the good work of Circular Ocean to see how we can build sustainability into the business models and how that will look for our communities and for our coastline. Aaron Wild is our first speaker today. We have three speakers. Aaron from NTNU in Norway, Martin Charter from the Centre for Sustainable Design in the UK, and Paritosh Despland from NTNU in Norway. We are going to take questions at the end of the webinar at 1:50, and if you can post your questions in the chat function on Zoom, or if you can post your questions on Twitter, we will pick them up there. We mightn't get to all questions today, but this is our first webinar and we hope to do these on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis. Aaron, I'm going to introduce you. Aaron is a researcher in the Department of International Business and Marketing at NTNU, Alesund in Norway. He has a background in environmental science and ecosystem services, and his current research focus is on life cycle assessment and eco-labelling. He's also coordinating a research group which is looking to build sustainability expertise across the NTNU Alesund campus in Norway. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron, can we hand over to you? Are you okay? Can you unmute Aaron?
Hello. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And if you're not speaking, can everybody else go on mute?
So I'm just going to get my slides on the screen now. So yeah, so my name's Aaron Tippett. I'm working at NTNU Ålesund. I'm a researcher in life cycle assessment and eco-labelling. So I'm going to introduce the Blue Circular Economy project to you on behalf of Sieb Marina, who couldn't be with us today. So to give you a bit of context, the Norwegian context anyway, we've got 90% of marine litter is made up of plastic, marine litter collected on Norwegian coastlines. And 37% of that is coming from the fisheries industry. So the fisheries industry in Norway is rather large. It makes up 35% of the total catch from EU EEA zone. So it makes up a big proportion of the total catch in Europe. So what's the fate of the plastic waste coming from the fishing gear generated by the Norwegian fishing fleet? Well, 51% of it is collected and sorted for recycling. And we've got 8% that's abandoned, lost or discarded. The rest of it's going to landfill or incineration. So as Clodagh said, the previous project, the precursor to the Blue Circular Economy project, was the Circular Oceans project running from 2015. So they concluded that there was a need to improve collection of end-of-life fishing gear across the Norwegian coasts. This can be done by improving port reception facilities, landfill tax, take-back schemes, penalty schemes, recycle-friendly gear design. And also they concluded that waste reduction is far more effective than beach cleans, and public participation is very important, as is engaging with fishermen. We need to ensure environmental and economic feasibility while closing the loop for plastics in Norway. So I'm just going to move my screen here. So the lessons learned from Circular Ocean were there's a significant growing public interest in the issue of ocean marine plastics. There's a variety of stakeholders engaged in the issue, including beach clean networks. There's a limited number of products produced globally from fishing nets, and most companies are micro SMEs. So there's two major recyclers in Europe. So there's Plastics in Denmark and Aquafil in Italy. So the funding context, so it's an EU-funded project. The Blue Circular Economy project is EU-funded, Interreg MPA. The priority is to promote entrepreneurship to realise the potential of the programme's area and create a competitive advantage, the result of which will be to increase awareness of and increase capacity to act on business opportunities beyond local markets. So the goal of the Blue Circular Economy project is to help SMEs offering products and services within fishing gear recycling solutions in the MPA region to attain a greater market reach and to build on the network developed under Circular Ocean. So it will set up a multi-level cluster to connect and catalyse SMEs in the region. So what are the outputs of the project? So we've got the clustering, so to create 3 clusters of recycled fishing gear in the MPA region and create sustainable value chains in the fishing gear industry. This is overseen by the Western Development Commission in Ireland. We've got the marketing strategy, so that's to stimulate market demand for products made of recycled fishing gear and to create environmentally and economically viable circular business models. And that's overseen by NTNU. And the third one is the Sustainability Product Standards, overseen by the North Highland College and the Environmental Research Institute. And that's to produce a blue circular economy eco-label with indicator. So there's a variety of partners across the region. The ones I've mentioned, also we've got the Centre for Sustainable Design, the University of Creative Arts, the Arctic Technology Centre, the Technical University of Denmark. And then we've got associated partners from Svalbard, we've got companies, we've got municipalities involved, and from the third sector is also represented. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals are addressed by this project. We've got 5 of them specifically addressed. Number 8, decent working economic conditions, industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, and life below water. So this is last slide. It's just to give you an idea of a sort of circular business model we'd like to see. So we've got the fishing gear being used to make high quality recyclate. In this case, it's HDPE. And that can be used to produce anything from platforms in aquaculture, to chairs, to jewellery, to clothing products. So a huge range of products can be used using this high quality recyclate. So that's everything from me. I'll leave you with Clodagh. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move now over to a look at the globally at the waste fishing nets, ropes and components in ports. And we're going to go to Professor Martin Charter for the Centre for Sustainable Design. He'll present the key results from the research into waste FNRCs in port areas in the NPA region and review existing types of products on the markets that is derived from FNRCs and present on the potential for engagement with SMEs in the Blue Circular Economy project. Thanks, Aaron. If you want to stop sharing, Aaron, we can now move to Martin. Thank you. You've got a lovely Norwegian accent, Aaron. Okay, Martin, can you take up the screen?
Yep, I'm just connecting, getting my screen up. So bear with me a second. So what I'm going to do is just give a bit of an overview of legislative and other issues. And sorry, I'm just bringing this screen up again here, and hopefully be able to share the screen. So getting the technology working is always the first challenge.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you very much, Clodagh, and the team for delivering the workshop, delivering the webinar. So Martin Charter, as it says here, and as said earlier, from UCN UK. We're a partner in the Circular Ocean project, particularly focused on the SME side. So what we've really seen over the last 3 to 5 years is images like this, emerging in the media, documentaries, and really it's created this emotional response in many people that has led to sort of citizen engagement and increased political engagement. And I'll come on to that in a minute. So really, what is the challenge? Well, the challenge is based on some original UN report, or a UN report, was approximately 640,000 tons of fishing nets and ropes, approximately 10% of overall overall ocean waste plastics, goes into the ocean each year. However, our previous project identified that some of the assumptions behind this were somewhat questionable. So it's a big number, however, and what we also found that there was a huge range of estimations about the nets and ropes going to the sea each year, from, as it said there, 10% to potentially 70% by weight. And as anybody who's been involved in sort of management type issues, you know, it's a classic issue. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we're still at a very early stage of understanding the system here. So as highlighted before, what we're seeing is primarily, you know, nets and ropes, etc., going into landfill or incinerated, or for a variety of reasons going into the sea. And you're often seeing at ports, you know, piles of nets or containerization of nets prior to landfill. And in fact, what we found in Greenland is, in fact, because they've got no infrastructure at all to deal with the nets, it's crudely a huge landfill site for the nets. So I've broadened out through the experience of the previous project to talking about what I call FNRCPs, but I won't use that every time, because fishing nets aren't just fishing nets. They include, you know, components, they include ropes, they include metals, they include other sorts of materials, and they even include these plastic components, which we found when we completed a hackathon related to trying to create products from the nets. The big game in town that's going to really impact the sector over the next sort of 5 years or so is the announcement of the Single-Use Plastics Directive that really was passed by the European Commission about a week or so. And really this is going to put in place in each member state an extended producer responsibility scheme. I personally have some, you know, challenges with this idea of going with this single instrument, because literally, you know, as was indicated previously, there are only 2 major recyclers in Europe, or materials recyclers in Europe covering the nets and ropes. So we really don't have the capacity to deal with things yet. So I don't know how the Commission is going to deal with this particular issue. So extended producer responsibility was looked at in Norway, but my understanding is now the Norwegians haven't gone so significantly into implementing extended producer responsibility because of the challenges of the sector, the challenges of the coastline, and also the challenges of the infrastructure. So they seem to be holding back on this whilst the Commission is going forward. So just summarising a couple of points that emerged from some feasibility study work we did in the Circular Ocean project, where we went round and did some research in ports in Scotland, Ireland, Norway and Greenland. And really we found an incredibly fragmented picture with a real lack of knowledge. And this is particularly highlighted, you know, in the study, which we actually made available online. And there's a lot of research, you know, throughout the project we've open sourced. We found at that stage, which is a few years ago, no specific legislation in place in any member state looking at the take back and recycling of the nets. However, we now have the proposal on the table, or the passing of a law on the table. What we also found that according to MARPOL, which is the a Convention on Prevention of Pollution, that 99% of small fishing boats were exempt from stringent waste handling regulations. So many companies, or many of the small guys, are exempt from the existing regulations. We found, you know, a lot of landfill and dumping of the nets, and as previously said, incineration. The waste management approaches, again, were very fragmented with differential fees dependent on ports, no universal system again. So the idea, you know, going forward is to move from sort of a vision of this to much more organized perspective, where we're looking at value in those materials rather than waste. And we're looking at how could you use that value in the materials within local innovation systems in ports to really develop new products and SMEs. And that's something we're going to be exploring in 2 ports, one in Scotland, one in Ireland, and one in Norway. So what's the opportunity? Well, as mentioned again previously, what we've got is 2 recyclers, one materials recycler in Denmark called Plastics Global, and one chemical recycler in Italy, who've developed a de- and repolymerization process for nylon that creates a second life fiber as good as new. It's going into clothing, for example. We're seeing already some level of pelletization of the nets, and there's obviously more potential to do that, for the pellets then to be used in injection molding to then produce products. What we've also started to see is the first commercial company producing filament for 3D printing from fishing nets, and these guys are based in Cornwall. There's a lot of experimentation going behind the scenes, but what we're looking at apart from that is what are the real products on the market. So in terms of what I term opportunity zones, where people can generate income, we're seeing, already specialist repairers in existence in some port areas that are repairing the very large commercial fishing nets that can be kilometers or miles long and worth upwards of what we heard, 250,000 euros. So there's a repair business. A lot of the artisanal fishermen will repair the nets anyway, just because it's they're smaller. The nets are valuable to them. We've seen some element of reuse, but direct reuse of the nets, but not as much as I thought when we did our global research. So one of the partners in the project is exploring how to use those fishing nets to reinforce concrete within construction. But there are many further applications for this that potentially entrepreneurs could take on board. We've also seen the first commercial reverse logistics company in the space, a company called Norvia, that essentially set their business up about 10 years ago, and they work very closely with Aquafil and Econal to collect those nylon nets. As mentioned before, 2 recyclers. There's been various people organizations who've tried to put a business case together to set up recycling facilities, but in the past that business case did not come to fruition. So I think we're going to see more business cases emerge as the more clarity emerges over the extended producer responsibility schemes. A variety of products are being developed, and I'll come back to that. And even some are experimenting with how you can use in effect, break down the polymers in the nets into oil. So one of the things we found in the project is when you ask people about, products from fishing nets, a lot of people go, that sounds interesting, but I'm not sure what you're talking about. So what we did was pull together and did some research into the products that we could find in the market worldwide. And we found about 20 different product categories from about 20 different companies worldwide that had commercial products in the market. There were some similar products, but it's still very small scale, but perhaps there's going to be growing business opportunities. And what I'm just going to go through very quickly is just examples of those types of products, so you've got that in front of you. So there are accessories. So sunglasses, for example, being produced by a company called Burio in partnership with another player. They're using injection molding to produce the sunglasses. Reuse of the ropes into bracelets and necklaces. Also keychains and dog leashes, for example. So that's one type of, there's the injection molding and the reuse, if you like, going on there. It's also important to point out that it's not just the fishing nets, it's also the gear for aquaculture as well. So, there's the whole host of equipment that was used for aquaculture and, farming of shellfish. So these are some bicycle baskets made from perhaps, I'm not certain about this, maybe a crab cage or something, or lobster cage. Similarly, these are other equipment that is being developed and commercialized. Also, we're finding primarily it's companies using the Econile fiber in clothing. So these are a company producing socks, there's swimwear, in variety of forms. A number of designers we've found have picked up on the Econile fiber and are developing, different types of clothing, particularly swimwear, board shorts, etc. Footwear is being produced. So there is, some pretty high-profile claims being made by Adidas in their terms of the use of fishing nets in their training shoes. However, I would like to see more evidence of the detail on this, and I think we're going to need to see perhaps more issues around the labeling of products to identify, if 1% of the polymer in, for example, shoes is made from fishing nets, or 0.0001%. So we need to avoid misleading claims. This is an interesting company in Italy, a designer and a business partner, and they've in effect went out on a beach clean, as far as I understand, and they thought about, could we reshape the nets into shoes, and they're selling these shoes. When I interviewed them, they claim about 250,000 euros. Sorry, 250 euros, not 250,000. Sorry. Home products. Interface Floor, a company who have sustainability in their DNA, again, are using the Econile into flooring tiles that they're selling in business to business. There's another company in the north of Scotland who are using the ropes to make mats for housing. And they also have a business model where they're showing you and helping you make those mats as well. So there's a product service model there. In recreation, Bureo, very interesting, probably one of the most advanced companies here, is making skateboards, fins. They're also making a range of other products using injection molding. Another company is producing gear for fishing, and there's garden accessories, bird feeders, and other products. So Bureo, very interesting, Chilean US company, and they have a very good, strong, so-called triple bottom line model where they're working very closely with the fishermen to collect and clean the nets. And then the nets then are then distributed to their facility in Santiago. They shred and pelletize, and then they start to produce, the skateboards and other products that we mentioned earlier. So they've developed a range of products there, but also they're producing enough pellets now that they're selling the material, the pellets, onto other players. So they're selling this onto an office furniture company who are making chairs from this. And then in a Me Too market, they're able to then differentiate that their black plastic is coming in effect from fishing nets. So again, reinforcing the point, at a port level, it's about moving from this to moving to this, and starting to think about, in a port level, for example, could we substitute the use of virgin plastics, for example, in the fishing industry, to having a closed loop system where we use those plastics from the nets back into maybe fish boxes, maybe we reuse into shoes, for example, or use maybe crafting skills and crafting communities to then produce jewelry and other products. So in terms of next actions, we're operating within work package on marketing, and we'll be delivering some 1-hour webinars around the whole business models and marketing side a little bit later. We may well trial a first webinar later this month or early May to complement Cloda's webinars. We're also offering one-to-one advice for startups and SMEs in the region, in the MPA region, in terms of getting their thinking online. And we will be also working in port areas to look at an idea of bringing together different stakeholders and looking at a sort of innovation lab, and also looking at things like circular business models and new thinking about how to reutilize that value in the nets and the broader aquaculture gear to produce products and businesses. So if anybody specifically have any questions on, if you like, the aspects that I've identified, please feel free to contact me or put something through the website. So thank you very much. I hope you got at least one idea from that or one thought, and I'll pass it back over to Clodagh.
Thanks, Martin. Paritosh?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Paritosh, I'll give you an introduction. So Paritosh is a final year PhD researcher at the Department of Industrial Economics and Technology Management, again with NTNU in Norway. And he has a background in environmental engineering and sustainability science. And Paritosh, for today's presentation, will focus on the supply chain of the fishing gear life cycle and the challenges that are arising from managing the waste of fishing gear and ropes in Norway. Thanks, Paritosh.
Perfect. Can you see my screen and slides?
Supply chain of end-of-life fishing gears. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Can you put it on the format we spoke about yesterday? Full screen?
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. Hello, everyone, and thanks, Clodagh, for organizing this first webinar. So all of you have been listening to Martin and also Aaron about what are the challenges and what have we done so far in the earlier project, and also about the recycling of fishing gears and ropes within the region of NPA. I'll be focusing more about supply chain of end-of-life fishing gears and what are the challenges. I mean, Martin just showed there are so many pictures about where you can recycle and reuse fishing gears and ropes, but why is it not happening in the reality? What are the challenges on the ground and opportunities? I will explain that briefly. These are the slides from my research. So, and my research is majorly focusing on Norwegian context. So I will be limiting this presentation up to that. So the content, I'll briefly talk about European policy on plastic recycling, and then what are the marine waste from fishing industry in Norway, what is the life cycle stages of fishing gears, and then fate of waste fishing gears, and then further opportunities of recycling and the challenges as well. So EU in the European level, plastic recycling and circular economy, these two are the buzzwords, and they have been getting a lot of ground. People are talking about it. A lot of funding is invested into this, and blue circular economy is one such project, which is the outcome of circular economy and plastic problem in the region. So latest EU strategy focuses on 4 pillars. Basically, it talks about improve the economics and quality of plastic recycling. We need to focus on that. They also talk about curbing the plastic waste and littering. So curb the pollution at the source itself. Drive investments and innovation towards circular solutions. So it invites various industries to collaborate to foster new solutions to close the loop of plastics and also harness the global action, because plastic is not especially marine plastic, because oceans have no borders. So plastics from the Asia can transport all the way to Europe and USA. So that's why global action is much needed, just like climate change. So in 2015, there was this particular paper came up in the Science, talked about plastic waste input from the land into ocean, and this particular paper raised eyebrows, because before this particular study there was no formal guidance or study or scientific report estimating the showing the range of scale of plastic pollution. According to the study, 8 million metric tons of plastic waste goes into the ocean every year from the human activities, and 8 million metric ton is a huge figure. And then that was the sole reason. After this paper in 2015, everyone started developing policies on plastic, and EU plastic strategy, which came up in 2018, is also part of this was a follow-up of this paper. Aaron already showed this slide. In Norway, composition of marine waste is no different. Around 37% of the total waste that we collect from the beach is coming from fisheries. And as Aaron already showed, that fishery in Norway, it accounts for 35% of the total fishery of European states. So it is very obvious that fishing related waste occupies almost one third, more than one third of the total waste collected from the beaches in Norway. So that's why in circular ocean we try to focus on just the fishing gears and fish related plastic problem, and wanted to see what exactly is this problem, how can we measure it. As Martin said, if we can't measure it, we cannot manage it. So measurement was the first issue. We took the traditional approach of environmental management of the systems and tried to uh, formulate the system life cycle of fishing gears. So as just like every other product, fishing gears are being designed and produced in the first stage. Then there is a use phase where fishers use and deploy those fishing gears in the ocean. Then there is a post-use phase where fishers also try to repair those fishing gears until the point that they cannot reuse it anymore. After that, there is this end of life phase of fishing gears. This is particularly interesting because if you see, end of life of fishing gears is every other product is generally landfill, incineration, or recycling. But in case of fishing gears, fishers also reportedly abandon or lost those fishing gears in the ocean and also on the land. So we have to measure all these fractions, and that's what we did in using material flow analysis on fishing gears in Norway. The objective of this study was to map the typical life cycle and also quantify average annual purchases, repair and disposal patterns of fishing gears, quantities of plastics entering in the ocean as abandoned lost fishing gears, and also annual quantities of plastic polymers, polyethylene, polypropylene, and nylon. These three are the building blocks of any fishing gears. So we wanted to quantify these particular plastic because based on these particular quantities, these particular quantities can we can build the policies for closing the loop and creating the circular business models of plastics from fishing industry. So from my study, what we found out is in Norway, the figure that you are seeing on your screen is the annual material flow analysis of plastics, polythene, polypropylene, and nylon from commercial fishing gears deployed in Norway uh, within the year 2016-2017. So I will start from the left hand side. Fishing gears purchased around 2600 tons of fishing gears, plastics from the fishing gears is being purchased, and Norway, within Norway, from the commercial fishing practices of Norway, around 380 to 400 tons of plastic fishing gears is getting lost or discarded in the ocean. Cleanup is always a good thing, and Norway is doing quite a bit of their efforts in cleaning up the beaches and cleaning up in the going in the oceans and retrieving the lost fishing gears. But cumulatively, it accounts for around 100 tons of retrieval. So that leaves every year Norway's stocking 300 tons of fishing gears in the ocean, and the fishing practices is dates back to 20 years. So you can just add the numbers, and even if this is a best case scenario, worst case could be much worse than what I'm presenting right now. So repair and reuse pattern is quite established in within the Norwegian fishing industry. As you can see, most of the fishing gears are sent for major repairs, and also they are being reused after repair. So in total, around 51% of the uh, so 51% of the total fishing gears are being collected and segregated for recycling in Norway. This was the figure of 2016-2017. Figures numbers might change after the Chinese ban on waste plastic, and also one of the Norwegian recyclers started their plant of recycling within Norway. So 22% of the fishing gears are being landfilled, and then 19% are incinerated, whereas 8% of the total fishing gears purchased are getting lost in the ocean as LDFG in Norway. So what happens to the waste fishing gears? So approximately 4,000 tons of end-of-life fishing gears and ropes are collected in Norway in the waste management plants. out of which 95% are sent out of Norway as of 2016-2017. So if you see, 95% is sent abroad, and there is no direct benefit to Norway for recycling those fishing gears. Upcycling is less than 1% of the total waste is produced is upcycling. Upcycling is like all the shoes and the bracelets and everything. All these products are nothing but the upcycling part of the fishing gears. And even though there are these startups are welcome, they are very important for raising the general awareness of public, defining the problem, but they are hardly solving any problem, because even the shoes and the bracelets, they even if you produce thousands of it, it is the required raw material for the production of that many upcycling product is hardly 50 kilos or 100 kilos. And here only Norway is producing 4,000 tons every year waste from the fishing. So we have to find alternative problems than landfilling, incineration, and upcycling. So what are the challenges of recycling? Well, this particular figure shows that polypropylene, LDP, and HDP. These three are the major polymers that constitutes fishing gear. They can be recyclable. So even though recycling of LDP and PP is a bit difficult, especially because every time you recycle polyethylene, polypropylene, they lose the material property, and the new recycled polymer is it loses the physical properties, so doesn't retain the same amount of flexibility, durability, or strength, for example. But still, the technology exists and it is recyclable. And how does the collection or the general supply chain of waste fishing gears look like? Well, you have to first collect the waste fishing gear, then there is a cleaning, because most of the fishing gears are covered with lot of dirt or biomass is stuck in it, like rotten fishes, fish oil, and everything. So there needs to be a cleaning, proper cleaning for fishing gears to be recycled further. Then there is a segregation part, which is also required, because many fishing gears are made up of metals or other types of uh, hard plastic, which are not easily recyclable. Then there are reprocessing strategies or technologies which we needed to do in order to get the polymers. In Norway, I guess we have one of the guests today. One of the attendees is coming from this particular container service or Norwegian Plastic Recycling Association. So this particular facility is located around in the central part of Norway, and what they do is they used to collect the fishing gears and they used to supply it to the Nofir, which Martin mentioned a while ago. But recently, since 2017, they started their own recycling, and they are kind of currently the only recyclers of fishing gears in Norway. So what they do is they have the granulation machine, and they follow the earlier diagram that I showed. They collect, they segregate, and then they further shred the polymers, shred the fishing gears and ropes, and then create the these particular HDP and LDP polymers out of it. So this is particular diagram already shown by Aaron. What they do is basically these particular recyclers, the polymers that you are seeing, HDP and LDP, these pellets can be used anywhere where injection molding is the production line. For example, manufacturing of walkways and rods of aquaculture industry, which is also one of the bigger industries in Norway. They are already thinking of replacing their some of their virgin raw material, virgin polymers, by these recycled plastic polymers from fishing gears. Also, Snowhetta recently launched a chair which is entirely made up of entirely or partially made up of recycled fishing gears from Nopric. So these sort of product to product recycling or a business case of recycling is what we need to look for, or what we need to explore, and that needs more eco-industrial approach, where industries needs to collaborate with each other in order to see how can they actually close the loop of these particular products coming out of waste fishing gears. Well, what are the challenges in closing the loop? I have shown so many good pictures or You have been seeing a lot of pictures about, okay, there are so many products we can make out of waste fishing gears and the plastic, but what are the ground reality? What are the challenges that these recyclers are facing, these collectors are facing, or the industries who want to recycle this plastic are facing? So first and foremost, I will again go with the elements of end of life fishing gear supply chain, and I will explain the challenges at each step that we are facing. So first part is collection and transport in Norway. And again, I want you to point the attention that this particular case study is only focusing on Norwegian context. So collection and transport in Norway, the geographical structure is so difficult that only 35% ports of Norway have port reception facility, that is PRF. Port reception facility in short term or in crude term, it's a dustbin. It's a dustbin of your home, for example. So it's a dustbin for port where fishers can drop off their waste fishing gears and ropes when they want to get rid of it for a small fee, and they have to pay that particular fee to the port officer. So because there only 35% port has this particular facility, we don't have enough uh, it obviously affects the efficient collection of waste fishing gears and ropes within the Norwegian region. We need to improve that particular facility. Norway recently lost the case against European Union, and they want Norway to focus on having smaller number of ports or developing at least mobile port reception facilities across all the ports that are there in Norway. So that is the part of collection. That's why we collect very little. Then there is also about the absence of formal guidelines for segregating the waste fishing gears at waste management companies. So those fishing gears that we collect at the waste management companies, the problem at that end is waste management companies do not really know what to do with the waste fishing gears. As you see, there is another step called as cleaning. Cleaning is required because of the most of the fishing gears are laden with biomass and stuff. Waste managers do not know this particular step, and they don't have infrastructure in place to segregate the waste fishing gears accordingly. So generally, they dump those fishing gears that are laden with biomass and oils with the municipal solid waste, and they just either incinerate the waste or landfill it. So that is clearly a loss of resource at the very end, just because lack of cleaning facilities. Then the next step is recycling itself. Well, recyclers have their own issues when it comes to recycling. Technology, of course, technology is there, but fishing gears are, first of all, they are not designed to recycle. Fishing gears are designed with three different polymers such as polypropylene, polyethylene, and nylon. And whenever there is a complex mixture of whenever there are one or more polymers mixing together in the product, then it is very difficult to segregate and separate them. It comes with the cost. Segregation cost is complex. Gear designs are complex. It is very difficult for recyclers to segregate them, cut them. It has some metal parts. So even chopping the fishing gears in the smaller fraction, it also involves a lot of cost in it. And also there is need of a stronger policy instrument to ensure recycling over landfilling, because many actors or many ports, because the landfilling cost in Norway is not that significant, many actors, they actually prefer landfilling over recycling because that is more cheaper for them. So these are some of the problems that recyclers face. Again, there is a market demand. Well, for example, Nopreg, they are in Norway. They are kind of recycling. Uh, they are kind of the sole recyclers of fishing gears in Norway. But then they need to explore they need to have the market demand for their particular product. Without that, they cannot really just produce. They cannot continue their production without sufficient demand. So, and for that we need industrial partnerships where all the injection molding technologies or industries that uses injection molding as a technology, they need to collaborate and see whether they can replace their virgin raw material, virgin polymers, by recycled polymers from fishing gears, and so on and so forth. So because of so at the end of the day, I just wanted to share the one thing, that recycling at that particular level is always gonna be difficult without economic incentives. We always talk about environment and social challenges and this and that, but without economy, recyclers won't invest in recycling, and neither the market will take up that particular challenge. So the last slide. How can we make this supply chain more greener for fishing gears? Well, again, I will give the various elements of supply chain design. We'll start from the design itself. We need to focus on eco designing of fishing gears and ropes. We need to design them in order uh, design them in such a way that they are easy for recyclers to recycle. They don't have to spend a lot of money in developing and segregating and cutting those particular elements and segregating them as per polymers. If you design it for recycler, then design it for recycle, then it it reduces a lot of cost at the very upfront, and it becomes economically less burdensome for the recyclers. Again, source. We have big sources of waste fishing gears, but then efficient collection is required. Without that, we cannot create lot of raw material or lot of waste fishing gears in the first place. Also, the recycling or the make, that means improve recycling efficiency by reducing waste. Recycling technology is relevantly quite new in the as of now, and they can go places if they figure out how to reduce the waste in the first place and how to improve their energy efficiency. Also, delivery, we need to optimize market uptake and recycle of recycled products and minimize the transport. So if we can find local takers of the recycled raw material, then it's one of the greatest achievements of any project. Another, return and replace. So according to me, only those solutions of those recycling attempts or solutions are sustainable where the solution is where someone is replacing the virgin use of raw material instead of creating just new products and not taking responsibility of those particular recycled raw materials. For example, you can create n number of belts and handbags and everything, but if nobody is taking responsibility of that particular handbag, then for me that handbag will also go in the landfill, but and the fishing gear is already going in the landfill. So we are not actually helping the environment, we are just delaying the obvious fate of landfilling. Yes, thank you for everything. If you have any
Thanks very
questions.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's extensive, and I know there's a lot in it, and for Martin too, and Aaron. And today we're just starting the conversation. So thanks to Aaron, Paratosh, and Martin. There was a lot of information presented today, and I want to go to those who attended. Are there any questions that are coming up for you? So if you want to unmute, or if you want to post them to the chat.
So let me see.
We can hear you, Margaret. Do you have a question? Is that Margaret?
Hi, Clodagh. This is Maria here from Mayo County Council. Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Maria. Yes, yes.
Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation to attend the webinar. I just have a quick question for the last speaker there. And the question just relates to the quantifying the volume of fishing gear. So I'm just wondering, is there any legislative requirement for the fishing industry to report on waste arising? Is it compulsory for them to report that?
Thanks for your question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah. So in Norway, every fisher has to report, all the big vessels have to report their lost fishing gears to the Directorate of Fishery. That is kind of a law, and but the smaller fishing vessels are not required to do that. Unfortunate part is there are 90% of the total Norwegian fishing fleet is smaller vessels, and just 10% of the total fishing fleet is large vessels. So 90% of the problem is not reported if they lose the fishing gears. And also the problem is just 35% of the total ports in Norway have port reception facilities. So many fishers, they don't really want to dispose of their fishing nets here and there, or even they don't even want to lose it. But because they don't have the facility to dispose it, they have to take alternative measures.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
I am Clodagh. It's Margaret here.
Hi, Margaret.
I just think that there might be an obvious one here, and I don't know whether you've considered it before, but the Bordiscevara, the BIM, fishing for
Yes.
litter. I think that you both could benefit from each other.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Martin, Margaret, you know, we are new to the project. Previously, Cork was represented, but Martin Charter is connected to Bordiscevara, so we've made those links.
Could you speak up there, because there was a low volume on the microphone? So
Do you want to come forward again, Margaret? We couldn't hear you that well.
Looking to see if I can increase the volume here.
I think it was on fishing for litter, was it?
Yes, fishing for litter.
Yes, no, we were aware of fishing for litter, and we're aware that they, as far as I understood it, they had piloted some projects with BIM in the past, and so we're aware of that. But I think also at the time they were starting to get more active in Ireland after other countries. So we are in contact with BIM, but if you've got any suggestions as to who we should be in contact with on fishing for litter within Ireland or any other countries within the NPA region, please let us know.
And Margaret, the partners are visiting. We have a partner meeting in Ireland from the 11th to the 13th of June. So we will organise a seminar for stakeholders, national stakeholders, and conduct a connected conversation on it. So Maria, local government, state agencies, all interested parties will be invited to that. So in May we'll get that invite out, and please distribute that to your networks as well. Are there any further questions arising from today? Margaret's still there.
Yeah, I don't really have any other questions, but I think that some of the Look West people could be very interested in what you were doing. 2 years ago, with WDC's help, we had a tent full of creatives, and I think that they would be very interested in what you're doing, Clodagh.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Margaret. And I know that Martin is the Centre for Sustainable Design is in particular interested in the creative economy. And we ourselves have legacy in that area, and our strategic statement is being launched next week, which will further support our interest in the creative economy. So I think what we've presented here today is that there's great challenges for us, but also that there's great opportunities for our coastline.
Just a quick addition to that is within Circular Ocean, we ran 3 hackathons focused on developing products from the nets, and the concepts for that were open source through Creative Commons. So we work with designers and entrepreneurs and others. So absolutely, we're interested in the involvement of the creatives. And I actually understand through another colleague at UCA who's more in the textile space, that there's some big creative event next year in Galway.
Yeah, Galway
Maybe
2020.
we can link into that in some form. Okay. Maybe.
And I'm conscious as well that Maura Hainu is on from Údarás na Gaeltachta, and they have partner Maura Innovation Centre. I know, Martin, you're working on an innovation concept that could feed into economies up and down our coastline. I'm conscious that there was funding announced from Europe this week for our coastal communities, and that brings in marine litter, pollution, maybe port reception or port recycling or upcycling facilities. We need to create a connected conversation, and we're at the start of that journey. So if everybody from today's webinar wants to be kept informed, I will include your email address on our communication database. If that's okay with you, please email me if you don't want to be included. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd like you to invite or to connect with the project and send on any queries or any specific areas or networks that you want us to contribute or be involved in. And thank you for your participation today. We'll be in touch with you. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks to my colleagues. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Clodagh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.